Hello everyone and welcome to this session on the circular economy. Thanks to Springfield Agri for inviting me along to talk to you today. I'm going to share my screen now. So in terms of a structure for today, I'm going to quickly cover what happened during the Green Revolution and why that's causing some of the problems we need to address today, and then look at the circular economy and how it can act as a multiplier for regenerative agriculture. And we'll finish with some questions. If you can use the Q&A function in the Zoom controls, that's not the same as the chat. There's another option for Q&A. If you post your questions in there as we go along, and then we'll work through them at the end. So, tiny bit about me. One of my first jobs was picking peas on my uncle's farm in Selby, and that was very hard work with very little pay. In my career, I qualified first as an industrial engineer, working in fashion and then in food, and then I moved on to project management in logistics and supply chain, with a bit of consultancy on the way. I've learnt a lot about productivity and efficiency, and I came to realize that that could easily tip over into exploitation. And by 2010, I was becoming interested in sustainability and feeling pretty uncomfortable about helping big businesses make a tiny bit more money whilst exploiting resources and wrecking our planet. So since 2014, I've been focused on sustainability and the circular economy and helping businesses use circular approaches to create more resilient, profitable and sustainable organizations. Back in 2015, I was contacted by Kogan Page to write a book about waste in the supply chain. That became A Circular Economy Handbook, first published in 2016, and the second edition of that was published last autumn. So I'd like to start with a quote from the Dasgupta review on the economics of biodiversity, commissioned by the UK government and published this February. And I think we're only recently starting to become aware of just how much we've affected all of the Earth's systems, destroying biodiversity, affecting the climate, affecting the water and weather cycles, and so on. So let's look back at the Green Revolution and how that started. And it's all part of something now called the Great Acceleration, when we got better, not just at farming, but at healthcare, sanitation, and so on. And really, after the 1950s was the time when marketing got ever more sophisticated, and we were persuaded that having more new stuff would make us feel better about ourselves and live better lives. And so if we look at these charts, they all show what we might call indicators of human progress, and they all follow the same timeline. Starting back in 1750, the first industrial revolution, and moving through to the current times. And there's a faint red line on each one showing 1950, the start of that great acceleration and the beginning of the Green Revolution. And so we can see they all follow the same exponential upward trend. Whether we're looking at energy use, world population, fertilizer consumption, even transportation. So perhaps it's not surprising that these indicators showing our human impact on the Earth follow the same exponential upward trend. We've got the greenhouse gases at the top of the chart. We've got ocean acidification, deforestation, domestication of land, the destruction of the biosphere, and so on. So clearly that exponential impact can't go on forever. We're already close to dangerous tipping points from which there's no return. And if we look at what we call the linear economy, where we take some materials, make a product, use it, and then chuck it away, we can see that at every stage of the supply chain, we've got adverse impacts, pollution and effluents, waste, toxins, all going into the air, atmosphere, soil, and water, undermining the very systems that we depend on for our survival. And what we're putting in, all those fossil inputs, make a difference. So this chart shows agricultural outputs from 1960 to 2009, and we can see that there is a big increase in yields, about 85% increase over nearly 50 years. But that's come at a massive cost, with fertilizer consumption going up by a factor of 4, pesticide consumption going up by a factor of 38 times, and a near doubling in land irrigation. So, as John Cherry said in the Financial Times a few months ago, the wheels are coming off. Yields are plateauing and costs are escalating for farmers in all sorts of sectors. And what we're putting in isn't even being used efficiently. If we look at this chart again from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the middle graph there shows fertilizer utilization, and we can see that over 2/3 of fossil fuel fertilizers are not even taken up by the crops. So we're not getting much value out of them at all. And you can see the numbers on land degradation, soil degradation at the bottom. So we're undermining healthy soils, which are at the heart of everything that we do. Without healthy soils, how can we create healthy crops and grow healthy livestock? And let's look at food production in a bit more detail. According to Mike Berners-Lee in his book, There's No Planet B, if we divide the calories from crops grown around the world for food by the number of people on the earth, then we find we grow 9,750 calories per person every single day. And yet we only need 2,350 calories for healthy living. So we're producing over 4 times as many food calories as each of us need every day. We feed 5,500 of those to animals. And yet we only get 590 calories of meat and dairy from those inputs. So just over 10% return on the calories going in. And looking at the edible crops, we're growing 2.5 times as many calories as we need to feed ourselves. Of those extra calories, around half go to livestock, with the other half going to make biofuels or lost as waste in the supply chain. As we all know, the pressures on farming over the last 70 years have been relentless. The drive for ever cheaper food, lots of sophisticated marketing from fertilizer, chemical and seed producers, and government policies encouraging productivity, efficiency and growth over the health of our home planet and the health of society. And we've got the power of big food businesses now able to play off local production against overseas supplies. And these have all led to a focus on efficiency and trying to find ways to make a profit, however small. But efficiency isn't working. We've lost nutrients from our soil, crops, meat and dairy. That means we've lost some of the value that we provided for our stakeholders, customers, wider society, and the planet we all depend on. And we've ended up creating greenhouse gases and pollution, depleting soils and destroying biodiversity, further undermining the health of our soil, crops, and livestock. We've unwittingly created a vicious cycle. And what we tend to forget is that business is a subset of planet and society, not the other way around. But times are changing. People are becoming more and more aware of the importance of climate change, of biodiversity loss, and how we need to all be adopting more sustainable behaviours. So lots of surveys now are showing us that consumers are changing their mindsets and changing their behaviour, making different choices about which companies they want to buy from and which companies they trust. And during the lockdown and the pandemic, it feels as if there's been another step change in the behaviour of citizens. We're realising that the buzz from consuming is very short-lived, and it's not really what's important. We're realising that being out in nature, being part of a community, and doing something that feels meaningful is a lot more important for our well-being. And so people are changing from a mindset of consuming to a mindset of caring, wondering whether they even need to buy this. And if they do need to buy it, who made it? Is it made from safe and sustainable materials? And where in the world is it made? Is it ethical? Is it traceable? And do these answers fit my values? From a food perspective, to give one example, people are choosing to care about hen welfare by opting for free-range eggs. In the last 15 years, sales have risen sharply and now represent over 2/3 of retail egg sales, more than double their level back in 2004. So let's move on to look at what the circular economy can do for regenerative agriculture. And the easiest way to understand the circular economy is to contrast it with the way we make things now, what's called the linear economy, but could just as easily be called a throughput or even a waste economy. We take some materials, make something out of it, use it, and then chuck it away. But all along that process, we're creating waste and pollution. In contrast, the circular economy aims to design durable, repairable products that are easy to disassemble and easy to recycle. We use safe, sustainable materials. And the overriding principle is that we should be designing out waste. All waste should become food for another process, either for another industrial process or food for nature, compost. A food example I like to use is to think about oranges. If I was setting up a business to make fresh orange juice, I'd end up with lots of waste from that process. The pips in the middle, all that white stuff, the pulp, and of course the peel. And I'd probably have to pay to dispose of that. But in a circular economy, I can use biorefining to get valuable nutrients out of all that waste instead. Pectin from the pips and the pulp can go back into food manufacture as a thickener. Orange essential oils from the peel are valuable for both cosmetics and the pharmaceutical sector. And in the last few years, a company's developed a way of making fabric similar to silk from waste citrus peel. So now, instead of having to pay to dispose of waste, I've got a whole range of valuable byproducts that I can sell into different industries, making my business more resilient and more profitable. So in the circular economy, we think about different loops, and the loops in the center are the ones we prioritize because those recover the most value. And the rules really are about using less, resource efficiency, getting more from less, so getting more productivity from everything that we're using. And then when we finish with the product, the components or the materials, making sure we use them again in a new set of products. And the overriding principle is to make sure that everything we put in and the process itself are safe for humans and living systems and sustainable, that we're not using a material faster than we can regrow it to make a new product. So we need to be focusing on resources that are abundant. So let's take a quick look at a food industry example, and then we'll come back to farming. So a number of years ago, British Sugar decided to look at what they were buying, sugar beet, and think about how they could get more value from it. They were paying for everything that came in on the lorries from the farm. What else could they make as well as the sugar products that they were focusing on? So they started by washing off the topsoil and the stones and selling the soil back to farmers and washing and grading the stones so they could be sold in different ways, with the smaller stones being bagged up and sold to garden centres because that created most value. And they're even using waste heat and CO2 from the sugar production process to grow tomatoes on site. At one time, they were the biggest grower of hothouse tomatoes in the UK. A few years ago, they switched from tomatoes to growing medicinal grade cannabis for use in an epilepsy drug. So let's think about farming. And there, as you probably know, for different strains of cannabis, there are other recreational uses. Perhaps not a sport that Nike would recognize, though. But as well as those recreational uses for a few of the varieties of hemp and cannabis, there are lots of industrial uses going into a whole range of sectors and using every bit of the plant, from the roots to the stalks, the leaves, the flowers, the seeds, and so on. So if you were growing hemp, there's a whole range of customer groups that you could be focusing on, depending on who your competitors were, what was going well at the time, and which markets you wanted to sell into. Again, making your business more resilient. And there are lots of benefits of growing hemp. It's naturally resistant to pests. It helps suppress other weeds, so it's good as part of a crop rotation. And it's low input. What happens when you might be selling into the retailers and they cancel a contract, or you end up growing too much because you're worried about harvest losses? A food campaign charity, Feedback, set up the Gleaning Network a number of years ago. And this is a range of volunteer groups all around the UK who will go into a farmer's fields when there's crop left over and it's going to go to waste, and they'll go and pick it and get it back into the food chain for people who need it. There's a toolkit on site and a contact email for farmers to get in touch if they're interested. And so far, over 550 tonnes of food have been recovered back into the food supply chain. And how else can we make sure we use those resources again when they're not fit for human consumption? Let's think about milk. Back in the 1930s in Italy, there were a number of companies using sour milk and transforming it into a textile for use in clothing and other things. That's kind of gone out of fashion since the 1930s, but in the last couple of years, a company called Q Milk have set up in Germany, doing a similar thing, but using modern technology. And they remind us that in Germany, 2 million tonnes of milk are disposed of every year as being not fit for human consumption. So Q Milk has developed a wide range of different applications, from fabrics to wool to wipes that can be used as baby wipes or in medical environments, thermobonding, bed linen, fabrics to go into cars, and so on. And there are lots of advantages. So Q Milk wipes dissolve without residue in water, and they can be thermobonded to other natural fibers to replace plastics and resin binders. Q Milk is naturally antibacterial. It can be a low-cost and natural replacement for silver as an antibacterial aid. It's naturally flame retardant. It's got excellent barrier properties for food applications, and it can even be made into sustainable microbeads for cosmetics. And all this is from milk that's not fit for human consumption. Companies are developing ways of using mycelium to grow a range of products. Mycelium, as you probably know, is the vegetative part of a fungus, a network of fine white filaments that are found in soil. And companies like Biome in the UK and Ecovative in the US are using mycelium to grow construction, packaging, and other products from agricultural waste, such as straw. And Biome have produced a mycelium insulation panel that'll be the world's first accredited mycelium insulation product. Biome are also developing new products and alternative applications for mycelium. You're probably familiar with anaerobic digestion, and that can produce a whole range of useful products from biomethane to compost and to special fertilizers to go back onto the soil. And in the circular economy, we're able to combine biorefining with anaerobic digestion to get even more value out of those farm wastes. And Scotland sees potential for between 500 and 800 million of savings just from 3 sectors: beer, whiskey, and fish. And research is going on into how to use insects to convert farm waste into feed for animals and maybe fish. And so ADAS in the UK are looking at that, and there are already companies up and running in UK, America, and across Europe doing just that. And of course, not all the waste produced on a farm is biological products: straw, waste food, manure, and so on. Some of it's plastic and chemicals. And companies like Solway Recycling up in the south of Scotland and north of England are helping farmers deal with those wastes by collecting them from farmer hubs around the north of England. And some of those they're converting back into useful products they can sell back to farms. And we can use digital applications to help the circular economy as well. Apps and platforms that connect people who have something with people who need it can be really useful to help collaboration and reduce waste and set up industrial symbiosis networks where we're getting resources back into the system. This is a diagram from the latest edition of my book showing the food supply chain and a number of different applications, apps from around the world, helping to reduce waste and get it back into useful sectors. And so we know we need to move from that vicious cycle, the linear economy, to a virtuous cycle, the circular economy. And we know that food production is a significant driver, not just of climate change, but of biodiversity loss. And so it's imperative that we find ways to turn that round. And I believe the circular economy is the best tool we have for creating sustainable, resilient systems. If we think about how the circular economy creates benefits for farmers, by recovering and regenerating your own resources instead of relying on fossil inputs, you're creating resource security, able to be sure that you can get hold of resources in the future because you're creating them yourself or creating them in collaboration with other farmers, and also being more secure about the cost of those resources into the future. That reduces the risks to your business, and some of those new ways of working, thinking about choosing crops that have multiple uses, thinking about how to get value from what you used to class as waste, can bring in new revenue streams, new customer bases, and build extra profit streams for you. Doing the right thing helps build relationships with customers, with suppliers, and with your community. And all of that builds your reputation. All of those combined make for a more resilient, profitable, and sustainable business. So it's about designing waste out of the system and thinking about how you can create value for all the stakeholders, your customers, the business owners, your suppliers, and of course, nature and the environment at the heart of everything. And I'd like to finish with a quote from one of my heroes, Ray Anderson, the founder of carpet company Interface. And back in the 90s, he had a revelation and created his Mission Zero. And he believed it was possible to do well by doing good, not at the expense of the planet, but of less alert competitors. So if you'd like to know more, there's a discount code for the book there. It's available from Kogan Page or from all good booksellers. You could listen to the Circular Economy podcast to hear interviews with startups and business owners using circular to help their businesses be more future fit. And of course, get in touch if you want to find out more. So hopefully we've got some questions there. If you've thought of a question but haven't added it yet, please type it in now, and I'll answer those in the next few minutes.